On the morning of March 15, 1943, Captain Lieutenant Hans Weber sat in the cramped communications room of his submarine, 200 meters beneath the cold Atlantic waters, absolutely certain that his message to headquarters was perfectly secure. The Enigma machine before him, with its rotating wheels and plugboard connections, represented the pinnacle of cryptographic achievement. German mathematicians had calculated that breaking its codes would require examining more than 159 million possible combinations. Weber smiled as he encoded the coordinates of a vulnerable Allied convoy. The enemy would never know what was coming. What Weber could not have imagined was that at that precise moment, in a sprawling estate in the English countryside, a young woman named Joan Clark had already decoded his message. She knew his submarine's position, his fuel status, and his intended target. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the account of how an impossible mathematical challenge became one of the greatest intelligence victories in history, transforming the outcome of the conflict and proving that human ingenuity could triumph over mechanical certainty. The story begins not with the conflict itself, but in the quiet corridors of Polish intelligence in the late 1930s. Three young mathematicians, Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rojicki, and Henryk Zygalski, sat in a Warsaw office, staring at intercepted German communications that appeared to be nothing more than random letters. Their government had obtained a commercial version of the Enigma machine, but the military variant used by the German armed forces during that era included additional security features that seemed to place it beyond reach. Rejewski approached the problem differently than traditional codebreakers. While others searched for linguistic patterns, he treated Enigma as a pure mathematical puzzle involving permutations and algebraic groups. He spent months analyzing the structure of messages, looking for mathematical relationships rather than words. The breakthrough came when he realized that the Germans, in their confidence, had established a protocol where operators sent the message key twice at the beginning of each transmission. This redundancy, meant to prevent errors, created a mathematical vulnerability. Working with mechanical engineers, the Polish team constructed devices called bombe cryptologiczne, bronze-colored machines standing about 1 meter tall, containing rotating drums that mimicked Enigma's wheels. These devices could test thousands of potential wheel positions per hour, dramatically reducing the search space. By 1939, the Polish team could regularly read German communications. They understood, however, that their advantage was temporary. The German military was constantly refining its procedures, adding complexity that would soon overwhelm Polish resources. In July 1939, with German forces massing on Poland's borders, intelligence officers Guido Langer and Maximilian Ciężki made a fateful decision. They invited British and French cryptographers to a secret meeting in the Kabaty Woods outside Warsaw. In a modest villa, they revealed everything: the mathematical methods, the reconstructed Enigma wiring, the bombe machines. British intelligence officer Alastair Denniston sat stunned as Rejewski explained permutation theory and rotor movements. The Polish team even provided 2 reconstructed Enigma machines as gifts, one for Britain and one for France. Commander Edward Travis accepted the machine with appropriate diplomatic gratitude, but privately wondered if British resources could succeed where the Poles anticipated failure. Within weeks, German forces crossed into Poland. The 3 mathematicians managed to escape, eventually reaching France and then Britain, where they would continue their work. Their initial breakthrough, however, had given the Allied effort something invaluable: a starting point. Bletchley Park, located approximately 80 kilometers northwest of London, was an unremarkable Victorian estate surrounded by small brick outbuildings. The main house featured an odd architectural mixture: Tudor chimneys alongside Victorian Gothic windows. The British intelligence services had purchased the property in 1938 as a backup location for their government code and cipher school. By 1939, wooden huts were being constructed across the grounds, each designated for specific tasks. Hut 6 would handle German Army and Air Force communications. Hut 8 would tackle naval codes. Hut 3 would translate and analyze Army and Air Force intelligence. Hut 4 would process naval intelligence. The recruitment process for Bletchley Park was deliberately unconventional. Traditional military intelligence relied on linguists and career officers. The new approach sought mathematicians, chess champions, crossword puzzle experts, and anyone who demonstrated exceptional pattern recognition abilities. Advertisements were placed in newspapers, inviting people to compete in cryptographic contests. Winners received mysterious invitations to interviews in London hotels, where they were asked oblique questions about discretion and patriotism. Alan Turing arrived at Bletchley Park in September 1939. Already recognized in mathematical circles for his theoretical work on computation. He was 27 years old, notoriously disheveled, and utterly indifferent to military protocol. His colleague, Gordon Welchman, later recalled that Turing would show up to meetings wearing a gas mask, not for protection, but because it helped his hay fever. Despite these eccentricities, or perhaps because of the intellectual freedom they represented, Turing would become the central figure in breaking naval enigma. The challenge Turing faced was more complex than the Polish team had encountered. The German armed forces had added additional rotors to naval enigma machines, increasing the number from 3 to 4. This multiplied the possible combinations astronomically. Additionally, naval operators used code books that specified daily rotor settings and plugboard connections, changing the configuration at midnight every day. Even with the Polish methods, checking all possibilities would take weeks, by which time the settings would have changed multiple times. Turing proposed building an electromechanical device that would examine contradictions rather than trying every combination. His insight was that if you assumed certain letters corresponded to specific other letters, this assumption would propagate through the Enigma's rotor system in predictable ways. If an assumption led to a logical impossibility, such as requiring a rotor to be in 2 positions simultaneously, the machine could eliminate thousands of settings at once. The device would search not through all combinations, but through logical chains of implications. The engineering challenge fell to Harold Keane, chief engineer at the British Tabulating Machine Company. Turing's specifications called for a machine standing over 2 meters tall, containing 36 rotating drums arranged in 3 rows of 12. Each drum represented an enigma rotor position, and the drums would rotate in coordination, testing logical relationships at speeds approaching 200 per minute. The machine needed to detect electrical contradictions and stop automatically when it found a potentially valid setting. The clicking sound of rotating drums gave the device its name, the bombe. Construction of the first bombe, designated Victory, was completed in March 1940. It immediately proved more temperamental than anticipated. The drums required constant adjustment to maintain proper contact. The electromagnetic relays occasionally stuck or misfired. Turing spent weeks at the BTM factory in Letchworth, troubling over mechanical details with Keane's engineers. They modified bearing assemblies, adjusted contact pressures, and redesigned relay configurations. By August 1940, Victory was operational, though imperfect. Joan Clark joined Hut 8 in June 1940, one of the few women recruited for mathematical work rather than clerical duties. She had earned top marks in mathematics at Cambridge, but was denied a full degree because the university did not grant them to women at that time. Her specialty was pattern analysis, and she quickly became essential to the Enigma effort. While the bombes could test logical chains, human analysts needed to provide starting assumptions, cribs as they were called. These were educated guesses about what certain encrypted passages might say. The most reliable cribs came from German procedure and habit. Weather reports transmitted at the same time each morning often began with predictable phrases. Submarine commanders reporting their positions used standardized formats. One operator had a habit of ending every message with the same sign-off phrase. These human elements, these small failures of perfect randomness, created the openings that mathematics could exploit. Clark spent hours studying decrypted messages, noting linguistic patterns and individual operator quirks. She maintained notebooks filled with German military terminology, organizational structures, and common phrases. By late 1940, Bletchley Park was processing hundreds of intercepted messages daily, but the critical naval codes remained largely impenetrable. The German armed forces had introduced additional security measures for submarine communications. Operators were instructed to use new procedures that eliminated many of the exploitable patterns. Without cribs, the bombs ran for days without finding solutions. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, submarines were inflicting devastating losses on Allied shipping. Convoys carrying food, fuel, and equipment from North America to Britain were being intercepted with alarming frequency. Merchant ships were being lost faster than shipyards could replace them. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source in May 1941, though it arrived at a terrible cost. A German submarine, after engaging a convoy, was forced to surface due to damage from depth charges. The crew abandoned the vessel before it could completely sink, and British forces managed to board the damaged submarine. Inside the flooding communications room, officers discovered code books and rota settings for the entire month. These materials were rushed to Bletchley Park in weighted bags, designed to sink if the courier ship faced capture. Harry Hinsley, a young intelligence analyst at Bletchley Park, was among the first to examine the captured materials. The code books confirmed suspicions about daily settings, but also revealed the full extent of the naval enigma system's complexity. Each page specified not just rotor orders and positions, but also plugboard connections, ring settings, and special procedures for different message types. The Weather Short Signal Book used different settings than operational messages. Emergency procedures had their own protocols. The system was brilliantly designed, with layers of security that would have been impenetrable without these materials. With the captured settings, Hut 8 could read naval traffic for several weeks. The intelligence proved immediately valuable. Convoy routes could be adjusted to avoid known submarine positions. Supply ships could evade patrolling vessels. For the first time since the conflict began, Allied shipping losses decreased dramatically. However, everyone at Bletchley Park understood that this advantage was temporary. Once the captured month ended, they would return to blindness unless they could break the daily settings without captured materials. Turing proposed an enhanced approach that combined multiple cribs simultaneously. If analysts could identify several probable passages within the same message, perhaps both a weather report format and a standard greeting, the bomb could test these assumptions in parallel. The contradictions would appear faster, eliminating impossible settings more efficiently. This required modifications to the bomb's wiring and a more sophisticated relay system. It also required more bombs. One machine running continuously could test perhaps 20,000 settings per day. To check all possibilities before the daily setting changed required dozens of machines working simultaneously. Production began at multiple locations. The BTM factory in Letchworth became the primary manufacturer, but assembly also occurred at facilities in Manchester and other cities. By the end of 1941, 15 bombes were operational. By 1942, that number had grown to 49. Each machine cost approximately £6,000 and required a trained crew of operators, typically members of the Women's Royal Naval Service, known as Wrens. These operators monitored the machines continuously, watching for the mechanical stop that indicated a potential solution, then recording the rotor positions and testing them on replica Enigma machines to verify the daily setting. The physical experience of operating a bomb was surprisingly demanding. The machines generated tremendous heat from their rotating drums and electromagnetic relays, making the rooms uncomfortably warm even in winter. The constant clicking and whirring of dozens of drums created a noise level that required operators to shout to be heard. Each run took between 10 and 20 minutes, depending on the crib being tested. When a machine stopped, the operator had perhaps 30 seconds to record the positions before the drum's momentum carried them past the solution. Multiple false stops occurred daily, requiring verification runs that consumed hours of valuable time. Jean Valentin, a Wren who operated bombs throughout 1943 and 1944, later described the strange combination of boredom and tension. Hours would pass with routine monitoring. Then suddenly a machine would stop and everyone would rush to verify whether they had found the day's settings. The work was classified at the highest level. Operators knew they were helping with intelligence work, but not specifically what the machines did or how the intelligence was used. They rotated between shifts, working around the clock in 8-hour periods, maintaining the continuous operation necessary to break each day's settings before midnight brought new ones. By mid-1942, Bletchley Park was regularly reading German naval communications within hours of interception. The intelligence, codenamed Ultra, was distributed through carefully controlled channels to prevent the Germans from suspecting their codes were compromised. Churchill received daily briefings. Naval Command used the information to route convoys and position anti-submarine forces. The system worked so well that German intelligence officers began suspecting betrayal within their own ranks. How else could the enemy consistently know submarine positions and convoy routes? Captain Lieutenant Weber, whose submarine we encountered at the story's beginning, was among those who questioned the security of their communications. In his patrol log from March 1943, he noted strange patterns. Convoys seemed to know exactly where to avoid. Support vessels arrived at intercept points that should have been secret. When he raised these concerns with his commanding officer, he was told what everyone in the German armed forces believed, that enigma was mathematically unbreakable. Any apparent patterns were attributed to British radar advances, aerial reconnaissance, or statistical coincidence. The alternative, that Allied intelligence was reading every message, was considered impossible. The irony was that Weber's skepticism was correct, but his superiors' confidence in Enigma's mathematical security prevented them from investigating the true source of intelligence leaks. German cryptographers repeatedly analyzed their system and concluded it was secure. They calculated the astronomical number of combinations. They noted the absence of captured code books after the initial incidents. They assumed that even if the enemy possessed an Enigma machine, determining daily settings without codebooks would require computational resources that simply did not exist. They were correct about the computational challenge, but failed to anticipate the combination of Polish mathematical insights, British engineering capability, and the industrial production of specialized code-breaking machines. What Bletchley Park had achieved was the creation of the world's first industrial-scale information processing operation. By 1943, the facility employed over 7,000 people. The bomb operation ran continuously, with crews working 3 shifts around the clock. Intercepted messages arrived via motorcycle courier from listening stations spread across Britain and overseas. Analysts in Hut 8 prioritized messages based on urgency and likelihood of containing useful cribs. The most promising messages went to the bombs first, with successful breaks allowing quicker decryption of subsequent traffic using the same daily settings. The process was far from elegant. Success depended on a combination of mechanical reliability, mathematical insight, linguistic analysis, and sheer industrial capacity. On some days, the bombers would break the daily settings within hours. On others, particularly when Germans modified their procedures or when intercepts were incomplete, it might take until late evening or not succeed at all. The pressure was constant. Every hour without access to current traffic meant operational decisions being made blind, potentially resulting in losses at sea. Hugh Alexander, who became head of Hut 8 after Turing moved to other projects, managed this pressure through meticulous organization. He created a tracking system for cribs, noting which phrases and formats proved most reliable. He coordinated with intelligence analysts to understand German operational patterns, identifying which types of messages were most likely to contain exploitable text. He worked with bombe operators to optimize machine utilization, ensuring that the most promising cribs ran first and that mechanical issues were addressed immediately. Under his leadership, the average time to break daily settings decreased from 12 hours to 6, then to 4. The intelligence advantage from Ultra extended beyond merely reading current German communications. Analysts at Bletchley Park could track organizational changes, supply situations, and strategic planning. When German forces mentioned fuel shortages, logistics problems, or equipment failures in their supposedly secure communications, Allied planners gained insights into enemy capabilities and intentions. Joan Clark's work expanded to include strategic analysis, using decrypted traffic to build comprehensive pictures of German military organization. She could track individual submarines through serial numbers, monitor personnel changes, and identify operational patterns that revealed broader strategic priorities. One particularly valuable source of intelligence came from German confidence in their codes. Senior officers communicated strategic directives through Enigma, assuming complete security. Operational orders, supply manifests, and damage reports, information that would never be transmitted over channels suspected of compromise, flowed freely through what German commanders believed was an impenetrable system. This meant that Allied intelligence often had access not just to tactical information like submarine positions, but to strategic planning at the highest levels. The psychological impact of this asymmetry cannot be overstated. German commanders made decisions based on assumptions about enemy ignorance, while their opponents possessed near-complete knowledge of German intentions and capabilities. When Admiral Karl Dönitz, commanding German submarine forces, planned coordinated attacks on Atlantic convoys, British naval intelligence read his orders before his submarine commanders received them. Routes could be adjusted, escorts reinforced, and air patrols positioned, all while maintaining the appearance of uncertainty that would preserve the Ultra secret. Maintaining operational security around Ultra presented its own challenges. If Britain too consistently avoided submarine positions, or if anti-submarine forces appeared too precisely at German vessel locations, enemy intelligence would investigate. To preserve the secret, Allied commanders sometimes had to allow successful German operations when preventing them would have revealed impossible knowledge. Convoys were occasionally routed into danger to maintain credible patterns. Aircraft were sent on reconnaissance missions over areas where submarine positions were already known, creating a plausible cover story for the subsequent attacks. These decisions, choosing which intelligence to act upon and which to appear ignorant of, represented some of the most difficult choices of the entire conflict. By 1943, the impact of Ultra on Atlantic operations became decisive. Submarine losses increased dramatically as Allied forces seemed to appear wherever German vessels operated. Dönitz repeatedly moved operational areas, seeking regions where the enemy's apparent omniscience did not reach, but the same patterns followed. He commissioned studies of British radar and sonar capabilities, seeking technical explanations for their success. German engineers developed new submarine types designed to evade detection. None of these efforts addressed the actual vulnerability, that every communication was being read almost in real time. The psychological toll on German submarine crews was severe. Weber's patrol logs from late 1943 revealed declining morale. His crew had departed on 4 patrols that year, and each time they found themselves intercepted or diverted by Allied forces under circumstances that seemed beyond coincidental. Other submarine commanders reported similar experiences. The feeling of being constantly observed, of having no secure area of operation, eroded the confidence that had characterized earlier periods. Weber wrote in his personal journal, never included in official reports, that he felt as though the enemy could read his thoughts. He was closer to the truth than he realized. By 1944, with over 200 bombs operational, Bletchley Park's capabilities had expanded beyond German naval codes. Army and Air Force Enigma variants, though using different settings and procedures, yielded to similar techniques. The industrial-scale operation that had developed around naval decryption extended to other German military branches. The volume of decrypted intelligence became so large that distribution and analysis became challenges equal to the cryptographic work itself. Specialized intelligence units were created to process ultra material, transforming raw decrypts into actionable intelligence for field commanders. The June 1944 Allied invasion of northern France benefited enormously from ultra-intelligence. Planners knew German force dispositions, understood command structures, and could monitor enemy responses to deception operations designed to mislead about invasion timing and location. After the landings, Ultra allowed Allied commanders to track German reinforcement attempts, anticipate counterattacks, and identify supply vulnerabilities. The intelligence advantage was so significant that some military historians have argued it shortened the European conflict by a year or more, saving countless lives on all sides. The true shock for German intelligence officers came after the conflict ended. During interrogations, captured cryptographers and signals officers remained convinced of Enigma's security. They attributed Allied intelligence successes to radar, aerial reconnaissance, and infiltration of German intelligence services. The revelation that Enigma had been compromised, not through betrayal or capture, but through pure mathematical and engineering capability, came as a profound shock. The machines they had trusted absolutely, whose security rested on calculations proving the impossibility of breaking the codes, had been defeated by creating impossible machines that performed impossible calculations. Hans Weber survived the conflict and eventually learned the truth about Bletchley Park during the 1970s, when Britain began declassifying wartime intelligence operations. His reaction, recorded in an interview with a German historian, captured the emotional impact of the revelation. He described feeling betrayed not by any person or institution, but by mathematics itself. The security he had trusted, that his superiors had assured him was absolute, had been an illusion. Every message he had encoded and transmitted with confidence had been read by young women operating machines in the English countryside. Every tactical decision based on assumed communication security had been made under false premises. For the people of Bletchley Park, the experience proved transformative in different ways. Joan Clark spent the remainder of her career in intelligence work, eventually becoming deputy head of her department, an extraordinary achievement for a woman in the intelligence services of that era. Alan Turing's contributions to computational theory and machine intelligence grew directly from his work on the bombs, establishing foundations for modern computing. The Wrens who operated the machines returned to civilian life with experiences they could not discuss, bound by secrecy oaths that prevented them from sharing what they had accomplished until decades later. The technological legacy of Bletchley Park extended far beyond cryptography. The techniques developed for searching large problem spaces, the electromechanical engineering that enabled the bombs, and the organizational methods for managing industrial-scale information processing all influenced post-conflict development of computing technology. Turing's theoretical work on computation, refined through the practical demands of code breaking, laid groundwork for programmable computers. The very concept of using machines to perform logical operations at speeds exceeding human capability, a concept demonstrated at industrial scale by the bomb operation, shaped the emerging field of computer science. The story of Bletchley Park reveals something profound about the nature of security and human certainty. German cryptographers had performed correct mathematical calculations. Their confidence in Enigma's security was based on sound reasoning about the computational impossibility of checking astronomical numbers of combinations. What they failed to anticipate was the power of combining mathematical insight with industrial engineering, of creating machines specifically designed to avoid checking every combination by exploiting logical structure. They assumed that security rested purely on mathematical complexity, not recognizing that complexity could be defeated by sophistication. The human elements proved equally crucial. German operators, confident in their system, developed habits and procedures that created exploitable patterns. The same human nature that makes us seek efficiency and simplicity, ending messages with familiar phrases, using standard formats for routine reports, created the vulnerabilities that mathematical analysis could leverage. Meanwhile, the diversity of minds at Bletchley Park, mathematicians, linguists, engineers, chess players, crossword enthusiasts, brought different perspectives that no single discipline could have provided. The solution required not just mathematics or engineering or linguistics, but all three working in concert. Weber's story and those of thousands of other German military personnel who relied on Enigma illustrates the danger of absolute confidence in any security system. The psychological comfort of believing communication was completely secure led to operational choices that would have been different under assumptions of potential compromise. Submarine commanders transmitted detailed position reports because they believed those reports were secret. Strategic planners discussed operations openly because they trusted their codes. This confidence, while based on sound mathematical reasoning, created vulnerabilities that careful operational security might have mitigated. For Allied forces, Ultra represented an intelligence advantage unprecedented in military history. Previous conflicts had seen individual successes in code-breaking or signals intelligence, but nothing approached the systematic, industrial-scale reading of enemy communications that Bletchley Park achieved. The impact went beyond specific tactical advantages to fundamental shifts in the nature of military planning. Commanders operating with near-complete knowledge of enemy capabilities and intentions could make decisions that would have been impossibly risky based on traditional intelligence. The reduction in uncertainty transformed the entire operational calculus. The preservation of the ultra-secret for 3 decades after the conflict ended speaks to its extraordinary value. Britain's government communications headquarters, successor to the wartime intelligence services, continued using techniques developed at Bletchley Park, and revealing those methods would have compromised ongoing operations. Additionally, many of the individuals involved in Ultra operations moved into sensitive positions in government, academia, and industry, where security clearances required maintaining confidentiality about wartime activities. The culture of secrecy that had protected Ultra during the conflict extended decades into peace. When the story finally emerged in the 1970s, it required rewriting significant portions of wartime history. Decisions and victories previously attributed to military genius, good fortune, or superior equipment were revealed to have resulted partly from intelligence advantages. The successful defense of Atlantic supply lines, the effectiveness of Allied invasion planning, the seemingly miraculous avoidance of German counter-offensives, all gained new context with the revelation of systematic code-breaking. Military historians had to reassess their understanding of numerous operations through the lens of this newly disclosed capability. The ethical dimensions of the Bletchley Park operation also merit reflection. The creation of weapons and capabilities that can decisively influence conflict raises questions about the nature of warfare and security. The individuals working to break Enigma understood their work's importance, but had limited visibility into how intelligence would be used. Joan Clark encrypted enemy positions, but the decisions about which actions to take based on that intelligence occurred far from Bletchley Park. The operators running bombs knew they were contributing to intelligence work, but not the specific consequences of their efforts. This distance between technical capability and operational effect characterized much of modern warfare's moral complexity. The story also illuminates the importance of persistence in the face of apparent impossibility. When Polish mathematicians first confronted Enigma, conventional wisdom held the problem unsolvable. When British cryptographers inherited the challenge, the addition of naval security measures seemed to place the goal even further beyond reach. Yet, through incremental advances, better mathematics, more sophisticated machines, larger operational scale, deeper understanding of German procedures, the impossible became routine. By 1944, breaking daily Enigma settings was an industrial process performed by thousands of operators using hundreds of machines. What began as theoretical impossibility ended as operational routine. For Weber and other German personnel who learned the truth after the conflict, the revelation prompted profound reconsideration of assumptions about technology and security. The machines they had trusted implicitly had been defeated not through any flaw in their mathematical design, but through the creativity and determination of people who refused to accept that impossibility meant impossible. The gap between theoretical security and operational reality proved decisive. Mathematical complexity provided confidence but not protection against determined, resourceful opponents with sufficient resources and ingenuity. The human cost of the conflict makes the intelligence dimension particularly significant. Every merchant ship protected through rerouted convoys represented lives saved, crew members, passengers, and civilians who would have suffered from supply shortages. Every submarine position revealed through decrypted communications meant opportunities to prevent attacks without risking escort vessels and their crews. While the intelligence war lacked the dramatic immediacy of combat operations, its impact on survival and loss was measurable in thousands of lives and millions of tons of shipping that reached port rather than sinking in the Atlantic. The transformation that occurred at Bletchley Park from a small experimental operation to an industrial intelligence complex mirrors broader changes in how nations approached technological challenges during this era. The willingness to invest in unconventional solutions, to recruit outside traditional military structures, to combine expertise from multiple disciplines, and to iterate rapidly on failed approaches until successful ones emerged, represented organizational innovation as significant as any technical advance. The bureaucratic and institutional changes that enabled Bletchley Park's success influenced post-conflict development of research institutions and technological enterprises. As the conflict concluded and German forces surrendered, Allied intelligence officers conducted extensive interviews with captured German cryptographers and signals personnel. The consistent theme emerging from these discussions was genuine surprise at the scale of the compromise. Even when confronted with evidence that Enigma had been broken, many initially refused to believe it, continuing to insist on the mathematical impossibility of the achievement. The cognitive dissonance between their calculations and the reality of what had occurred created a genuine intellectual crisis for these individuals who had devoted careers to creating and maintaining secure communications. The final irony of the Enigma story is that the Germans were partially correct. Breaking the codes through pure brute force examination of all combinations would indeed have been impossible with any technology available during that era. What defeated Enigma was not brute force but intelligence itself in both senses of the word. The mathematical intelligence to understand that the problem could be transformed into searching logical chains rather than testing combinations, combined with operational intelligence about German procedures and habits, created the breakthrough that mechanical calculation alone could never have achieved. The security of the system was defeated not by checking every possibility, but by being clever enough to avoid needing to. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.